Hello everyone and welcome to Free Practice 1 here at Homestead Miami Speedway for the Formula E Miami E3 live on JBMotorsports delayed premiere on Formula E Zone. Welcome to everyone watching it on a delayed premiere. We will be live for the rest of the weekend. We were meant to be live for this session, but due to an incident at the main commentary box, it is not able to be safely used this evening, so we are having to unfortunately do it behind the scenes a different way. Let's go and join the commentary for this series and for this session. It is the Formula E feed. Let's go over and listen to them now. Hopefully it should work. Tom Brooks.
Nicky, the green flag flies for the first time in 55 days since the checkered flag fell in Jeddah, and we are so excited to be back in the United States of America and at a brand new venue for Formula E in Season 11. The Homestead Miami Speedway is the circuit, a new challenge for the drivers, and particularly challenging conditions this afternoon. About an hour and a half or so ago, we were due to get underway with the shakedown. However, there was a deluge. The circuit was pretty much underwater with the safety car going round, and as such, the session got cancelled. So this is the very first time the drivers have ended up on circuit in their machines around the Homestead Miami Speedway. So what can we tell you about this track? Well, it's 3.5 kilometres long. It's a roval, so it's part road course, part oval. We are using part of the banking here this weekend. It's actually the longest circuit on the Formula E calendar in Season 11, and it runs in an anti-clockwise direction, one of 4 anti-clockwise circuits on the calendar for this year. You can see as the two Nissans make their way through and on the run down in towards the next hairpin bend. This is down into turn 8, a prime overtaking opportunity, and you can see, despite the fact that it's very warm, very, very humid here in Miami, that there are still a few damper patches offline on the circuit. Shouldn't be too much of a problem for the drivers, but certainly something worth considering. Down into the chicane of turns 10 and 11, you can see the abrasive surface is then swapped for a big old patch of concrete as the drivers come back onto it. The white line there right up onto the banking on the left-hand side of the picture, and then on towards the final corner to the start-finish straight. It'll be very interesting to see what happens here this weekend. Of course, a new challenge and a long time since we've been out in Formula E. 8 weeks, a lot of time for teams, for drivers, to use this as an opportunity to reset, to get some software developmental updates in here as well. Jamie Chadwick and Billy Munger joining me in the commentary box. Billy, really excited to be back with Formula E, of course, but a long time since we were out in Jeddah, and a lot of opportunities for drivers, for teams to make sure that they are now at the peak of their performance.
Yeah, we've almost had an 8-week mid-season reset, really, haven't we? Because the drivers that were on form, as we're riding on board with the man that has been the most on form in the first few races, Oliver Rowland, he's been super consistent. He would have wanted a race every single week in that gap. He would have been absolutely itching to get back behind the wheel, because him and the team were just so in tune. And it felt like, for me, Oliver Rowland, he almost had everything covered as a driver, so complete.
Full course yellow, please.
That's Marek Hanachevsky there, just doing a full course yellow test. This is a standard procedure in Formula E, so what we do is we do it in Free Practice 1. Basically gives the teams, the drivers, an opportunity to make sure that all the radio communications are working, all the gantries at the side of the circuit are working, to make sure that everything is aligned, so that if this situation happens under racing conditions here tomorrow, that we're all as good as we should be. But yeah, Jamie, as we said,
green
one
flag,
moment.
please.
But yeah, as we were saying, so a lot of opportunities for things to change here, Jamie. And you've driven this circuit, you were saying before you came into the commentary box, incredibly abrasive surface. How do you think that's going to create a challenge for the drivers? What does it mean?
I think it's going to be tough, to be honest. Obviously, hot conditions, abrasive surface, a tyre that, you know, is designed to be durable and designed to not necessarily be these peaky kind of one-lap tyres, but when they tested in Jarama earlier in the year, it was similar to this, and it was the same sort of situation where they found they were getting this one-lap peakiness of the tyre, and then it's very difficult in the race runs to manage it for the distance. So I think it'll be exciting if that is the case. It's going to make it a more one-lap focused qualifying session potentially, and even in practice it's going to be difficult for them to make meaningful setup changes as the session goes on.
You can see the run onto the start-finish straight out of the final corner and then across the timeline here for Oliver Rowland, the driver leading the championship. There is team principal Tommaso Volpe, and well, he'll be grinning from ear to ear the fact that they are leading the Drivers' Championship, leading the Teams' Championship as well, Billy. But of course, that's all the legwork there has primarily been done by Oliver Rowland.
Well, I mean, it has been. In terms of the points, he scored all the points for that team. So the fact that they're leading a Teams Championship just shows how dominant Oliver Rowland's been at the start of this season. And he'll look across the other side of the garage. He'll know that at the minute he's had the upper hand over his teammate Norman Nato. And Norman will know, because he'll put pressure on himself to deliver, as all the drivers do, that he's really got to find that performance that's clearly within the car.
And I think this car really suits Oliver Rowland. He's quite aggressive as a driver. He drives in the seat of his pants, where he's often on the limit, rarely over it, in the sense that he has a very good natural ability not to make too many errors in that sense, but he is, I think, in a very good situation with this car in terms of getting the most out of it, which some of the other teams and drivers are struggling to do.
Just saw the Porsche there of Antonio Felix da Costa going through turn 4. That's where the attack mode will be activated under racing conditions. Gives drivers an extra 50 kilowatts of power, but also four-wheel drive in Gen 3 Evo. Walking the circuit there earlier, Billy, there's a lovely bit of camber on the inside of that corner. Really can hook it up, but on the outside, where the attack mode is going to be activated, it sort of falls away, that camber. So I think the problem you've got there is that when the drivers come back onto the racing line in racing conditions, that there is a possibility they're going to be very, very close.
Everyone's going to want the same piece of tarmac, to be honest, when we get to the exit of that corner. And attack mode here is particularly interesting, in my opinion, as well, because the next corner after the attack mode actually favours the people that use attack mode, because they're on the left-hand side. There's a left-hand corner that comes out. So if you do run side-by-side through the part of the lap we're watching there, as it looks like someone's just taken up some spray, maybe on the inside of the curb, potentially, or just on the inside of the circuit.
Yeah, as we said, huge downpour here earlier. The track is primarily dry, but as you can see, the grass on the inside of the curb, they're just holding a little bit of water, Jamie.
I think that shows how much camber there is actually there, because it's sort of awful down into the bottom of that corner at the apex, but it's riding incredibly quickly, so it doesn't surprise me that there are a few places that need a little bit of drying up still, and maybe Mitch was doing that intentionally to try and speed up the drying process a little bit.
See the Andretti's here, special livery for them this weekend. You can see it was home race for...
barely turn past 90 degree.
So Jake Dennis was complaining there about heavy steering. As I was saying just a few minutes ago, special livery for Andretti, home weekend for that team here at the Miami Homestead Speedway circuit. And Sean McGill, Dennis's race engineer, just be trying to change that. These cars don't have power steering, Billy, so they are incredibly heavy to steer at the best of times, aren't they?
Yeah, it's just, again, a part of the challenge for the drivers to have to navigate. They've obviously come through junior categories, and a lot of those categories don't have power steering either, so it's not something that is unusual in a single-seater racing series, to be honest, but again, just something that adds to the physical strain involved with Formula E.
And I wonder if some of the teams have gone a little bit more aggressive here with the steering settings. A lot of the drivers, after testing, took all the caster and everything that makes the steering heavier out of the car, because the steering has been notably heavy in this version of the car. So I wonder if maybe Andretti have gone a little bit aggressive, and yeah, Jake's saying, you know, it's too much at the moment.
Here on board with Max Günther, winner from the first race of the weekend in Jeddah, and hero to zero for him, really. Won the race in spectacular style on the Saturday. On the Sunday, he ploughed into Antonio Felix da Costa at the third corner. Wasn't a particularly brilliant end to his weekend, but he had a long time to reset, Billy. How do you reset as a driver when you get yourself into that position? Of course, you've got such a long time between race weekends. It's not like you can just jump back on the horse.
No, but equally, I think his mistake was so obvious, and, you know, race ending for him, that he just knows that that risk didn't pay off, it wasn't worth it, and that if he's going to really, you know, be a serious contender for the championship, especially when you see the consistency that Oliver Rowland's put out, you can't make that sort of level of mistake. So he'll know that the situation he's in, he knows the points that he's potentially thrown away from having that mistake. He's had a long time to think about it, so that can probably be a bit of a negative for him. I'm sure he would have preferred to have a race the following weekend in order to just bounce back, because like you said, in the first race in Jeddah, he was an unbelievable form, and I think we all know that he's got that in his locker, but unfortunately he's just not consistent enough with it, and that's what you need to really be a serious contender for this championship.
On board here then with Sebastian Buemi on the Envision, now changing over to a driver's eye view, coming down into turns 6 and 7. You can see they put a wall on the inside of this corner. It sort of narrows the entry of it, but it's such a flowing run through turn 6 and then into turn 7. You want to make sure that you get as strong a run as possible here, coming down in towards turn 8, because look how wide it is on this part of the circuit. When we're getting into the race, and we're expecting it to be an energy critical, high pack, intense race, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it, you know, you don't want to be going and getting a poor exit out there, because you're going to carry it all the way down into that hairpin. Yeah,
I think that's the important thing to note with this circuit, because it's so wide. If you make a mistake, you're not potentially going to get overtaken by one car on the inside. You can have 2 or 3 passing you. So in terms of like making mistakes in the race and that costing you lots of positions, and then you having to spend energy to get back up the pack, you just really can't afford it.
Well, Dan Tinkton there's just cost himself a bobble too, because he's broken one of our cameras on the exit of
He's not
turn
paying
4.
for that.
New hairstyle though this weekend. He's rocking the mullet and the beard.
Yeah, he's gone with the trend on that one. I'm not sure if it quite suits him, but fair play to him. He's a braver man than me.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what Dan Tinkton is going to be able to do here this weekend. Of course, it hasn't only been a break in the calendar, but it's also been not necessarily as much of a break for the teams, because we've had the Evo sessions happening in Miami, Jamie. So we invited a load of influencers and so on to come and drive an actual Formula E car for an actual Formula E team. It looked like an incredible event.
Definitely, and I think the teams really embraced it as well. You know, they put a lot of prep into it. They got a lot of the influencers and celebrities into the simulator, gave them a really good shot at experiencing what Formula E really is all about. So, yeah, I think it was fantastic to see. It looked super competitive as well. I saw some lap times and different drivers pushing out there. So, yeah, very cool to give other people the opportunity to see what Formula E is and, you know, what it takes to be a driver at this level.
Yeah, I was talking to Scott Mansell, driver 61, who was in the Lola at Yamaha actually, and his aim was to try and get as close to Zane Maloney's time as he possibly could. He got to within a 1/10 of a second, made a YouTube video about it. I really recommend going to watch it, because it has a fantastic story arc as well. And Scott being a racing driver himself and so on, he said he really wanted to test himself against the world's best drivers, and to have the opportunity to do that, it doesn't come around all that often.
Yeah, it's very rare to be able to be on the same piece of tarmac in the same equipment as guys that have been doing this their whole lives. And I mean, it just is such a good learning experience, I think, for everyone that was involved in that. I mean, not only just the influencers and the creators that were getting the chance to drive the cars, but also for the teams to see how quickly, you know, people that don't have that sort of experience can adapt and learn.
So let's talk energy then. 38.5 kilowatt hours of energy in this race, but as you can see, it's a very fast, very flowing circuit. Lap times down into the mid 1:24s, courtesy of Lucas de Grassi over the timing line. But we're expecting this to be a high energy pack race, because there's not a lot of opportunity to regen. There's no big braking zones here, Jamie. So how are the teams going to approach this weekend? You know, what do they do in terms of a strategy going into that race?
I think, as you say, it's going to be a high energy race, so focus has to be on conserving energy as much as possible, and I think that's where the pack racing that we've seen previously will come into fruition. Oh,
Dan Tinkton just getting caught behind Eder Mortara in the Mahindra.
Drift there, wasn't it, Tom?
He likes going sideways.
He
does.
Dan Tinkton. If there's any man on the grid that likes being sideways, I think Dan's that guy.
Yeah, we were a little bit clenched in there, Dan Tinkton, but thankfully all okay. Keeps it on the straight and narrow, sitting 3rd fastest at the moment. Looking at Maserati, they are 7th and 8th quickest, Jake Hughes and Stoffel Van Dorn. Let's go down to Alexa, who's catching up with their team principal, Cyril Blaze.
Thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, I'm joined by Cyril. And Cyril, there's been a bit of a chat over the last few weeks about the team's ownership situation. We'd love for you to just clear things up and tell us from your perspective what's going on.
There's nothing to comment. I don't want to comment on the team ownership structure. What I want to comment on is the result from the team, you know, in the last race around in Jeddah, with the first podium of the year, you know, for the team and for Jake, and also a fantastic race from Stoffel, who came from last to P6. So that's what I want to be talking about.
Okay, and for sure, we've got a piece with Jake and his engineer coming up later on this weekend, and he's settled into the team so well. You must be delighted with the momentum he's having.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Both drivers are doing a fantastic job. I think the first 2 races we didn't perform the way we wanted. It's always going to take a bit of time, you know, for the team to gel and the driver to find their mark, especially for Jake, as he comes from a different manufacturer as well. So it's a new environment. So it takes a little bit of time, you know, for everything to settle and to gel. But I can really see that the momentum is with us. In Jeddah, that was a fantastic performance, you know, and Jake is really finding his feet. And I'm sure now we're going to be able to score some strong results, you know, for the second half of the season. After all, we only done 3 race weekends. there was a bit of a gap since Jeddah, so we're eager to come back racing, especially here in Miami. I think it's going to be a fantastic event.
And actually, the gap's a good point between that and the chatter we mentioned before. How, as a team principal, do you keep your team's focus in the right place?
Yeah, that's it can be good and it can be bad because you can focus on the wrong thing. But we had a bit of time and everybody is mega motivated. It's always good to, you know, when you got a gap like that, to have a strong result because you get the guys even more motivated. Not that I need a lot to give them a lot of motivation, but obviously we had a chance as well to go a little bit testing as well. So to keep pushing the car, you know, the powertrain and everything. So I think it was a good thing. And I don't need much to get those guys motivated. I think they're really eager to go back on track and then to get some strong results. Obviously, a podium was good. Now the target is to get a win.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Best of luck for the weekend, and back to you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you to Cyril, thank you to Alexa. Good to hear that Maserati MSG in high spirits ahead of this weekend. We just saw a replay there between Pascal Wehrlein and Da Costa.
So we're going to swap at turn 3, swap at turn 3. If you can keep R3, do so. If not, R2 is available.
So actually this is interesting because this is them simulating the pack racing already. They're talking about swapping positions in the slipstream. So I think what they're doing here is trying to gather some data on how effective that slipstream effect is for saving energy and managing. And interesting that DS Penske are already getting ahead of the other teams to try and get some numbers and get some data to start churning.
Yeah, hugely exciting stuff. Just going back to that moment we saw between the two Tag Heuer Porsches, we saw Da Costa and Wehrlein getting close for company and giving Florian Modeling an opportunity to use his new anti-wrinkle cream that I'm sure he's brought here this weekend because, well, that was a bit close for comfort going down into turn 8.
Boy, you're already ruining our relationships with the team bosses right now by bringing up wrinkles with the team bosses. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a close call between the two of them. You could tell Antonio Felix Da Costa just had no idea that Pascal Wehrlein was right up behind him. No contact made, luckily, but it was really close.
Oh, contact made though there for Robin Freitz with the cone coming onto the banking. Just looked like he had a bit of a rear twitch, which he did. And then
maybe more than a switch, you'd say. He had a bit of opposite lock going on there.
Yeah, managed to gather it up all okay. Took the cone out in the process, did Robin Freitz, and no harm done. Down in 13th position at the moment. Teammate Sebastian Buemi in 19th place at the moment, but still just over 23.5 minutes left in the session. You can see the two Maseratis here pretty close for company as well, trying to replicate what we saw with the DS Penske's.
I was wondering how long those cones were going to last there, to be honest, and it's not taken very long with the first session for them to start disappearing.
It's interesting, that final corner, because that banking is there. You almost saw Robin there have that moment, but as soon as you get to the banking, it sort of squares the car up and it gives the drivers a bit more grip, where it sort of allows them to, you know, get hold of anything if it's a bit loose. So it's interesting to see their approach there. Are they going to allow the car to move underneath them, carry the speed through the corner, and knowing that the banking is going to sort of help them out further around?
Well, the thing is with Formula E, the cars do move around a lot more than you'd have with the car on slick tyres, just because of its very nature. You've got tread blocks, they move on the surface and so on. You can see the two Maseratis here now just exchanging positions. Stoffel Vandoorne going ahead of Jake Hughes as they swap places going onto the banking out of that final corner. But yeah, it's interesting because, as you say, the car's looking a bit unstable going on to certain parts of the circuit. They move around a lot more than you'd get from any car really that's, you know, is on a slick set of tyres.
I think that's why they put those cones there in a way, is to manage that transition.
Try red 1, Edo, try red 1 to 0. Red 1 to 0, try another lap.
So Mortara there, red 1 to 0. We'll have to find out what the internal code of that is with Mahindra. Where is he at the moment in the standings? Second fastest, isn't he? So he's not looking too bad right now, but just trying to give himself an opportunity to build up for another lap here.
He sounded a little bit flustered on the radio there. It didn't sound like everything was going completely to plan, like you say, even though he's second. I mean, to be honest, there's a big margin at the top of the time, so I think a lot of drivers have still got a lot more performance to come. Lucas Di Grassi fastest by 1.2 seconds at the minute.
Yeah, see what the rest of the drivers and teams are going to be able to do. Here is Da Costa now being pulled back into the box to have a chat with his race engineer and work out what changes they will be making going into the remaining 20 minutes of this session. In terms of his performance in the United States of America, it's actually been quite a happy hunting ground for Da Costa. If you remember when we raced in Portland, he had some strong results there in 2024, doing the double, of course, going into the final weekend of the championship with an opportunity to win that outright. But here, of course, very different kettle of fish at this Miami Homestead Speedway. Looking at Dan Ticktum here, just coming through into this final section, you see they're really using a lot of that curb on the inside coming into this final infield section.
Yeah, I think a lot of the curbs towards the end of the lap are actually usable for the cars. You know, some of the curbs earlier in the lap are a little bit more aggressive. I think you're seeing drivers maybe stay away from them a little bit more, but particularly in that quick left-hander, like you say, they're really using all that inside curb, opening up that corner just to carry the speed through there as much as possible.
So looking at Robin Freites just coming down in towards turn 8. This is where we're expecting a good chunk of overtaking opportunity. As I was talking to Dak actually on the track walk earlier on this morning, and he was explaining that going into there, of course, it's so wide, but it is going to bottleneck up. You can, you know, send it through on the inside, but it gets a bit tighter actually on the exit of the corner. So if you're not in the right place at the right time, you could be compromised.
Exactly, and I think what's interesting is Da Costa's last performances were in Portland, which was a similar, very energy, you know, critical race. So I think he's someone that's very good at racing in the pack there. And literally in those races, you don't want to be out front. So it's probably managing when to be able to make those moves, especially down into turn 7, and what point of the race you want to start getting aggressive.
Well, delighted to be able to welcome James Rossiter to the commentary box. James, you've literally come fresh off a plane this afternoon, so full props to you for jumping into the box. But looking forward to seeing what is going to happen this weekend here in Miami.
Yeah, super exciting weekend ahead of us, I think. We're going to see a lot of action going on with the teams having had 8 weeks to evolve and learn their settings.
Time is good, time is good.
So just there from Sam Bird to his race engineer Stephen Lane, just talking about the traffic, and that's one point actually I wanted to talk about, because we have seen a few drivers getting caught up. There's a lot of blind corners, a lot of fast corners, and you were commenting earlier, James, it seems very much like a one-line sort of circuit, especially on this infield part of it.
Yeah, it does seem like there's one line. It also seems like a lot of the camber that you guys were talking about earlier, it really makes the steering go super heavy in those moments. So it's one line through those corners. We're seeing everyone starting now to push a bit harder, and you see it even clearer. I do wonder how many people are going to start cutting the grass or ending them up on the grass as we progress in this session.
Yeah, doing a good impression of a lawnmower, a bit like Suzuka last weekend for Lando Norris. Just looking then here at Pascal Wehrlein, got quite friendly with his teammate a few moments ago, going into turn 8. I have to say, going into this chicane actually out of turn 9, turns 10 and 11, there's a big surface change you can see there, concrete, after the abrasive tarmac. Is there a possibility you think that could get rubbered down quite a lot as the weekend progresses?
I think we're going to see a lot of rubber going down. It depends whether it rains again, as you said earlier, there was a lot of rain, and whether that rain will then wash it away. But I think there will be a lot of rubber going down. There'll be a lot of track evolution, people figuring it out. One of the questions I have for you, Jamie, actually, you've raced here, there's a corner here where you come off this banking and there's some grass. Do you cut the grass to gain lap time?
You try not to be honest. It's a bit awkward in terms of phases. So here at turn 1, you kind of want to be able to exit and open your hands up, but you can't because the grass is there, and especially as we've seen the rain, you can't really be using that grass. But at the same time, I think we see it a little bit in Mexico City as well. These guys are going to be using every inch of track that they can, so it's going to not be too long before we see a big hole of mud in those areas. But it's quite common here where it feels like you want to be starting to exit and letting the car run. There's a patch of grass or there's something that stops you from doing that.
Yeah. I do wonder here with the tyre temperatures, Lucas did his lap very early, very early, that impressive lap time. And I do wonder that now the tyres are getting quite hot. They've been running for a long time. They've been doing some race runs, some other things. Whether or not they're just losing performance with the temperature of the tyre.
So is there an argument to say that going into the dual stages of qualifying that we could actually see the first phase of those sessions being the ones that drivers are able to set the lap times on? Or do you think that traditionally it's more towards the end of that session, isn't it?
Yeah, drivers trying to use a colder set of tyres, and normally what we see in the dual system trying to use a hotter set of tyres in order to get the peak performance at turn 1 when you've only got an outlap. So yeah, it will be an interesting play, see how that one works out over the course of the weekend.
Certainly. Well, this is Roger Griffiths, Andretti team principal. Just saw Jake Dennis out on track, running 8th fastest. Andretti with that special livery here this weekend. He had a big snap of oversteer, did Jake Dennis. He's just coming into the final infield section. And he just about avoided the grass there on the outside.
It looks like in that surface change there's a big bump of compression that just spat that car into a lot of oversteer, and at this point of the session the tyres just are not living with any of that.
So here then is the McLaren. Taylor Barnard in the pit lane, Sam Bird out on track, his teammate at the moment, the youngest and oldest driver lineup in the field. and Bird making his way through into this final series of corners. Begin to see what Sam Bird is going to be able to do, because he's not had a podium since Sao Paulo last year. It's been a long time since he stood on the roster, and if you look on the other side of the garage at what Barnard's been able to do quite incredibly at the start of the season, James, and you know, he's going to have to start delivering those results.
Yeah, Sam's been super fast. He just hasn't managed to string together a whole event. It's so high pressure here in Formula E to get practice right, then carry that momentum into qualifying, into the duels, and then deliver the race. And Taylor's been exceptional. I mean, for a rookie, unbelievable, to be perfectly honest. And he's just over-delivered, and I think that's put a bit of a shadow on Sam. But I do think Sam's going to regain his form. Once he puts together a race weekend, I think we'll see him go on a run of podiums, because clearly the car is capable of doing it.
So drivers then coming down into the chicane. That's Nick de Vries also with Pascal Wehrlein. You can see a special livery here for the Cupra Kiro team this weekend. They've partnered up with Marble. This is Dan Ticktum in the box. Feeling a bit under the weather yesterday, actually. He said, don't get too close, I've got a virus. I was like, oh, okay, well, hang on, I'll stay, I'll social distance myself away from you, Dan. Thanks very much for that. But, yeah, seems to be on a lot better form today and ready to deliver some strong results. I have to say, I've been really impressed with Cupra Kiro's resurgence this season. If you compare to where they were last year with their own powertrain, they've got the customer Porsche power unit in the back of that, and it's really given them a new spring in their step.
Absolutely. I think we've seen Dan fighting in the duels and making it through and transitioning, which is exactly where he wants to be. I think he's now been in Formula E for a little bit of time. He wants to be fighting for points every weekend, and it feels like he's not necessarily had the opportunity to do that for a while. And again, similar to Oliver Rowland, I think these sets of regulations and the way that the car is kind of suits him. That aggressive style, you know, driving the car on the limit a lot is something that suits Dan, and I think also with the team improving as well, it's given him a good opportunity.
Well, just under 15 minutes now left of free practice one. Diaz Penske fourth in the Teams Championship. Victory last time out in Jeddah for Max Günther. Let's go down to Alexa and see what the stories are on the ground in that garage.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm currently stood outside the DS Penske garage, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a flavour of what it's like to be on the ground here in America, because Homestead is a very traditional American track. You'll see the banking around the track. It's pretty hard to miss, but we're not going to be using, well, pretty much any of that. We've got the middle course in the middle of the track that we're going to be using, but as you can see, the pit lane here is particularly American, and it's split up into different pieces. So you've got the garages, as we're very, very used to seeing in Formula E. Now, the cars are having to be pushed into here. They're plugged in, they can download the data, the drivers can talk with their engineers, maybe even making some more specific changes. But perhaps if in the session they just need to come in, make some slight adjustments, they've got these tents behind me, the sort of traditional working lane, and then the fast lane, and then the track. So it's a pretty good setup. It's a little bit unusual for what we're used to seeing, but I'm excited for how it could play into the racing this weekend. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexa. Certainly a unique layout in this Homestead Miami Speedway circuit. Just saw a Nissan having a bit of an off-track excursion. On board here with championship leader Oliver Rowland. 17 points the advantage that he has over Taylor Barnard in the Drivers' Championship coming into the 5th round of the season. What's he going to be able to do here this weekend? Will he be able to increase that advantage? So just touching shy of 160 miles an hour and going straight on down at turn 8 is Rowland and cutting the grass.
Yes, another lawnmower moment. I feel like we're going to see a few of those as the session progresses, when the guys are really feeling the limit, and when you brake so late, if there's nothing you can do sometimes. And yeah, Oliver showing that there's a little bit of runoff for him to make his escape.
Well, he was in a full power attack mode lap. You can see that with the magenta lights on the back of it. So obviously the closing speed is going to be greater, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you get the exit of the corner before and you just arrive so much faster. You actually have to brake earlier when you have more power and the four-wheel drive. Oh, or something weird. Yeah. Maybe his car didn't slow down as much as he was expecting.
Let's have a little look, see if we can piece anything together on board. Just looks like the rear locks or something, doesn't it?
So normally when you have those flashing lights on the steering wheel, normally that's the electric motor not regenerating the full amount because it's stopping the wheels from locking. So he was at the limit of his tires. He probably arrived there 5-10k faster than he has done before in the lower power, in 300 kilowatts. And then he's just struggling to manage that and get the right braking point, pushing the limit for the first time.
Yeah, it's lit up by the rental car dashboard at the moment on his steering wheel, isn't it? So hopefully he's able to get that sorted and get out for the remainder of the session. Mitch Evans over the timeline. He's in a full attack mode lap, so time's now beginning to come down. Drivers looking to try and see how fast they can go and push the limits a bit more here of this Homestead Miami Speedway. I have to say, there's so many blind corners here, Jamie. I know it's only practice, but especially as we head into the group stage of qualifying, there is a good possibility that a few drivers might end up being a bit upset with some traffic.
Yeah, engineers are going to have to be on it, making sure they're all aware of who's coming on hot laps and not. But honestly, I think it looks incredibly tricky. I don't know whether it is, with the tyres overheating or, what it is at the moment that they're struggling with. Maybe some of their simulator models had slightly higher grip than they're experiencing out there now, and it's not quite correlating to what they were expecting. But it looks so tricky. We're seeing big snaps of oversteer, a lot of runs through the grass. Obviously, Oliver Rowland going straight on there. I mean, now is the time to do it in practice, but at the same time, it doesn't look easy for them.
We're about 28 degrees air temperature at the moment. It feels a lot hotter than that because the humidity is, well, it's pretty intense, let's put it that way, especially with the rain that happened this afternoon. It's just made it a little bit more unbearable in terms of the weather conditions. You see Nato fighting the car, big snap of oversteer then coming down through into that final sector. That was going through turn 13, and on the track walk, drivers were saying that is going to be a bit of a bogey corner because it's blind. You've got that compression coming off as well, and even on the start-finish straight, it's not flat completely. There is still an element of banking. You can see that quite visibly here with Mitch Evans.
No, it seems very, very tricky, the track, and a lot of different camber changes, surface changes, I think, and as Jamie was saying earlier, there seems to be a couple of big bumps when you're going quite fast, which when you're at the peak and the limit of your grip, and you go over a bump, you're going to have the moment. And you can see that the rear tyres are really not hanging on Nato's car there towards the end of his lap.
No, absolutely not. Here is Antonio Felix da Costa then, making his way through the first couple of corners, down through into, in fact, no, he's towards the end of the lap, actually, and just making his way past a little bit of traffic. See the tyres there, or hear the tyres chirping in pain. And again, just a bit of rear instability on the entrance to the corner, just sort of fighting for a little bit of control here is da Costa.
I think, honestly, one of the tricks this weekend is going to be doing a clean, clear lap. It looks so easy to make a mistake, lock up, or go a little bit deep in the braking or run wide, that I think the key is going to be just putting everything together, maybe bringing it back a tiny, tiny bit, but just having a nice, cleanly executed lap to try and get the most out of it.
Lock up there for Antonio Felix da Costa down into turn 8. Not the first driver that we've seen do that. If you remember Ollie Rowland just a couple of minutes ago doing exactly the same thing. Thankfully, no harm done there for Dak, but that will have compromised his lap time ever so slightly. You can see they're just about 0.4 of a second down. In terms of track limits, by the way, going in towards this tricky turn 13, it's basically you've got to have two wheels to the left-hand side of that white line. That's within the track limits, so that's what the race direction have deemed is acceptable. But I imagine drivers are going to be flirting with those limits because that's what the nature of a race driver is all about. You've got to try and get the maximum lap time out.
I think they're going to be over the limit in most places, as we've seen already in this session. So it's interesting to see now everyone's putting their laps together. The Jaguars have just jumped straight to the top. They seem pretty fast, and their car balance seems very good throughout the whole lap, something that's separating them at the moment from the others.
Well, Cooper Kiro currently just inside the top 10 with Dan Ticktum, David Beckman down in 21st place. But as we saw earlier on, new livery on their car this weekend. Let's go down to Alexa, find out what that's all about.
And isn't it a mega new livery? I'm joined by Olivia from Cupra, and I wondered if you could talk us through what the whole thing is about.
Of course, yeah, we have a partnership with Marvel for their new movie going out on the 2nd of May. And we wanted to adapt as much as possible to the movie, so the Thunderbolts. And this is basically, you can see like the color completely changed. It's really, it makes us think about the movie, Marvel, like this concrete breaking completely, like breaking the rules. We have also our colors from Cupra Kiro. We have the yellow blending in the concrete. We also have the copper that we find over there. And if you have a look on the front wing of the car, you also have like the 6th character of the movie. So we really try to blend in there.
And in the last 2 months, you've had Idris Elba, Mr. Beast, and now Marvel involved with the team. What does that say about this team's ambitions for the future?
You know, we are trying to break the rules, and we are trying to always having something new. And this is our ambition, always more.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you very much to Alexa, thank you to Olivia there as well. So who will be Captain America this weekend in the garage for the Cupra Kiro team? We'll wait and see what's going to happen there. Currently Ticktum leading that charge. In fact, Beckman's actually just got up to 7th quickest as that interview was ongoing as well. So Last 6 minutes now of the session. What do you think the teams are going to be looking at here as we come to a close of free practice 1, James? How are they going to be attacking these last few moments?
Chassis balance, trying to understand how to make the tyres last for an entire lap. I think trying to understand how they're working now in the four-wheel drive mode with 350 kilowatts. Are you killing the front tyres? We heard Lucas Di Grassi on his radio there a little minute ago complaining that he just doesn't have the traction and he has understeer. So he's trying to figure out how to solve 2 problems there. Normally not so easy to solve 1, but solving both could be very challenging. Yeah, you don't want a car that's not handling on the exit of the corner. This is tyre cooling strategy here from Lucas Di Grassi, showing his wisdom at his old age. No tricks will be lost on him. Old age, you make it sound like he's qualifying for a bus pass. I'm sure he won't thank you for that, but I suppose that's actually quite a good idea, come to think of it.
It's a good idea. The only problem is if this works, then where's he going to find the rain or the cool patches come tomorrow? So, yeah, obviously tyres are a big issue.
I don't know what I'm learning. I'm driving
Yeah, okay.
it's undrivable.
Let's box this lap, Seb. We have to.
It's undrivable. That's a sentence that you don't want to hear from your race engineer, sorry, your driver to your race engineer. Sebastian Buemi talking to Connor Somerville there and coming into the box. Buemi not happy there with the balance of the car at all. No, not at all. He's got the Jaguar powertrain as well, and the Jaguars are super good. So I think there's going to be some questions asked by Seb to his team tonight and to his engineers, and push them hard to try and match the Jags. I have to say, speaking of Jaguar, actually, they had a bit of a tricky weekend last time out when we were in Jeddah. If you look at Nick Cassidy's start of the season in particular, he had no points on the board until we came into that weekend of Jeddah. They seem to be, at least in free practice 1 so far, having a much better run of things. Yeah, Nick's been super unlucky. I think he's another one who's going to string it all together. His second race in Jeddah, though, I was watching at home, was exceptional. I thought on a strategy that was heavily compromised, he managed to maximise his points. And I think he's really got his mentality together, and I think he's ready to really start his challenge again this season.
It's also interesting that in this sort of qualifying trim, high power mode, they look competitive, which is what I think they struggled with a little bit earlier in the season. So I think the race pace and strategy, as James was saying, is strong, but if they can unlock that a little bit more in qualifying, get through to the duels, get through to the final, then that's going to be something that unlocks, hopefully, some more points for them.
See Verlo fighting the car all the way through turn 7 there, just taking multiple stabs at the wheel, down into turn 8, a little bit deep. I thought he was going to try for a late apex line there, but he just decided to forego it altogether, through turn 9 and into turn 10 and 11. This is where we've got that surface change. You see how tight it is there as well, the wall really sticking out on the right-hand side, right up against it. And then quite a violent snap over to the right-hand side of the circuit before this turn 13, which has caught so many out. It looks super difficult. I mean, they're really struggling to hold on to the car. They're definitely earning it this weekend. I mean, it's sliding around everywhere. It looks very tough out there to string a lap together. We've got 26 laps of this tomorrow afternoon. I'm keen to see what it's going to look like at the end of this one, because we're only at the end of a 40-minute free practice session, and well, I can imagine they're going to be pretty warm inside the cockpit of those cars. Inside the Tag Heuer Porsche garage, just looking at Florian Modlinger. Here is Da Costa, just clipping the bigger curb on the inside through that chicane of turns 10 and 11. The problem is it then chucks him wide for the right-hander, and he's going to be carrying that all the way down to the next braking zone. Yeah, if you're going to hit that big curve, you're better off taking all of it than just a little bit. So they're probably just flirting a bit with how much they can take, what unsettles the car, and what they can get away with there. I suppose the risk there as well, if you hit it on the right-hand side, there's a wall greasing you there if you get it a bit too wrong as well. Taylor Barnard jumping up to P3. Good lap time for him. And also, as we said earlier on, incredible start to his season, taking podium in Sao Paulo, a podium in the first race in Jeddah for second place there. He sits second in the Drivers' Championship. He was incredibly close with Jake Hughes in the second race of the season, finished second on the road there as well in Jeddah. Just incredible. Pole position, youngest ever pole sitter. He's got the opportunity to become the youngest ever winner in Formula E. I don't know if there's any accolades that he won't be able to break before the end of this season. I really loved watching Taylor get his elbows out against Jake in that last race in Jeddah. It was super exciting to watch. It was great to see him start to establish himself among the old guard of Formula E and show that he can really race wheel to wheel, race hard, and clean as well. I mean, we talk about it as well. It takes time to adapt to Formula E cars. It's a very different dynamic, especially if you're used to driving single-seaters with big wings and slick tyres and so on. Coming into Formula E, he's just taken to it like a duck to water.
Exactly, and I think that's been a myth for a long time, is that those with experience and those that, you know everything about Formula E and the way that it works and the intricacies generally have a big advantage. And he's kind of sort of defeated that myth big time by coming in and having a stellar start to the year. And I think what we're just seeing then with them swapping for positions is these types of things that make Formula E so unique and so different to anything he would have done before, and actually might be a bit more challenging for him this weekend in comparison to the first few races of the season.
Just saw Zane Maloney jumping out of the car with a minute to go to the end of the session. I wonder whether that might be down to a technical issue, because as you can see, the other 21 drivers all out on track at the moment, so it seems a bit of an unusual strategy if that was going according to plan for Maloney and the Lola Yamaha app team. Hopefully we'll get a bit of a debrief at the end of the session and find out what's going on.
I find it quite interesting as well that Lucas de Grassi's lap time was still that lap time that we saw so early on in the session, and it's put him P8. He's still, okay, 8/10 off the pace, but they've learned a lot about that circuit, or this circuit in between that time. So I think it's definitely got to be done very early in terms of the lap time with the tyre.
What are the teams going to be doing at the end of this free practice session, James? Of course, we're going into FP2 early tomorrow morning at 7:30. It's going to be cooler than it will be when we go into qualifying, especially for the race in the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think they're going to go through all the data that they've accumulated today to check and validate all the things that they've been doing differently, that they've learned in the last 8 weeks, trying to learn and see what's applicable to this weekend. So I think that a lot of the teams, from what I understand, have learned a huge amount, changed a lot of settings. They're going to see which ones have worked and not. As you said, early start tomorrow, different temperature. Still think it'll be quite warm, but I think the tyre preparation is going to be less critical. So what they're doing now is really learning as much as possible for qualifying tomorrow.
Checkered flag is out. Verline having a problem with the brakes, as we understand it, according to the team radio, going down into that chicane at turns 10 and 11. Final lap times then coming in. Taylor Barnard was lighting up the first sector. He's on a push lap as well as the other McLaren of Sam Bird. So let's see what Barnard is going to be able to do. He comes across the line, he goes third quickest as he takes the checkered flag then, so he stays third fastest. Sam Bird also pushing then on this, his final flying lap in the session. Nato not too far adrift there as well, just up the road of him by a 1/10 of a second. Let's see whether these two are able to change positions. They are. Bird goes up into 6th fastest in the Neil McLaren, so positive start for that team in FP1. What about Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans then? Well, Cassidy across the line, he's fastest as we can see. Evans 4th quickest there as well. Here is Lucas de Grassi. We saw him setting that lap time early on in the session. He's on a push lap here at the moment. Does he improve as he comes across the line? No, not quite able to do so there for him. Tictum just getting up into 8th position at the end of that session. And a few other positions there beginning to change. You can see the track performance. Neil McLaren looking handy there in the first sector. Jaguar though, Jamie, in the second and third sectors, they've got the momentum.
Looking really strong and able to improve probably the most at the end of the session, which I think that's what they're going to be encouraged by, the fact that everyone seems big drop off with the tyres, yet they still seem to find a window to improve and make a little bit more lap time up. So between him and Mitch, Nick and Mitch, I think they should be pretty encouraged to have both cars in the top 4 there.
Well, strong starts to the session then for the 2 Jaguars, 2 Porsches all up there in the top 5, as well as the 2 McLarens nearly inside the top 5 there. Bird just missing out courtesy of Pascal Verline. On the other side of the coin, Oliver Rowland, we saw him earlier on.
Try and check everyone's tyres as soon as we come in.
So Cassidy there just wanting to see what everybody else's tyre degradation's like, presumably.
I think he'll want a visual look on what everyone's tyres look like. He'll know what his feel like, and internally they'll know how they feel, but it's knowing what everyone else is up to. And I think it's going to be interesting. Do they prioritise this 1 lap qualifying performance, or do they find something that's going to be good for the race, knowing that it's going to be an energy critical race?
Jake Dennis just had his lap time deleted there for track limits down at turn 12. So we'll see what that's all about. This is Pascal Verline, the moment that he had coming down into the chicane. So he's out of turn 9 into turns 10 and 11. On the brakes he goes, and car just doesn't want to stop in time by the looks of things. Let's have another look. All looks okay on the exit, coming down on the brakes.
He's got out of that just in enough time. At this stage of the session, there's no point in putting it in the wall for no reason. So, yeah, really tricky. Braking, traction, kind of everything. Every whole phase of the corner, everyone seems to be suffering with. So, yeah, I quite enjoy it, watching the drivers make mistakes. It's not easy for them, clearly, out there.
Well, a bit of a session then of two halves at the end of this one, as we said. Delight for some teams, a bit of disappointment though for others. Dennis, of course, having that lap time deleted. Roland, we heard him on the team radio, he ran on down at turn 8 in the mid part of that session and said that the car didn't stop in time, essentially. There was something that seemed like it was wrong. So whether that technical issue thwarted an opportunity for him to improve his lap time at the end of the session, I'm sure we'll find out a bit later on. And also as well, Sebastian Buemi, slowest of the lot by half a second compared to Nico Müller. Sebastian on the steam radio stating that the car was undrivable at one point during that session. So work to do for him, his race engineer, and indeed for the Envision team. So looking here then at the standing starts. Now, as I said earlier on, Jamie, that start-finish straight, it's still banked. It's not completely flat at all, is it?
Not completely flat at all, and actually quite a narrow run into turn 1 there. So this start is going to be quite critical to make sure that you can try and find yourself in a good advantageous position. A few of them struggling a little bit with the grid slots already, but yeah, I wonder if with the banking there's going to be a big difference, because in America there's always rolling starts. You rarely have standing starts, so it's going to be a bit of a unique situation to see a standing start on a banked track. Yeah,
I'll be keen to see how it funnels down into that first corner, because let's be honest, Formula E on the first lap is generally pretty chaotic at the very best of times, as we see a big old burnout there for Maximilian Günther. Let's get the results though at the end of free practice 1 here in Miami. It's Nick Cassidy on top for Jaguar TCS Racing. He'll be delighted with that start to the weekend after a difficult start to the season. He's just ahead of the man who's third in the Drivers' Championship, Antonio Felix da Costa, ahead of the man who is second in the Drivers' Championship, Taylor Barnard in third place, ahead of Mitch Evans, Pascal Wehrlein. Sam Bird, good session for him, and likewise Norman Nato in 7th place as well. Dan Ticktum snuck up into 8th position at the end of that one. He is ahead of Günther and de Grassi inside the top 10. Then you've got the two Dutchmen, De Vries and Freit, ahead of Beckman, Hughes, Van Dorn, Verne, Mortara. Then Jake Dennis, a lap time deleted for him post-checkered flag, ahead of Oliver Rowland, who, by the sounds of things, had a technical problem at the end of that session. He was just in front of the Lola Yamaha apt car of Zane Maloney. Nico Müller, not the start to the day for Andretti and their home weekend, 18th and then 21st for the Swiss driver. And Sebastian Buemi also down there in 22nd and last place. Problems with his car, according to the race radio or team radio that we heard earlier on in that session. So they'll be hoping to rectify that, come into FP2 all guns swinging. And here then there are some super slow-mos. Taylor Barnard continues to impress in the Neon McLaren. That team's second in the team standings, second in the driver standings for the youngest ever driver in Formula E. And he's got a good opportunity to take some accolades here this weekend. Da Costa, he'll be pleased with second. This man here, though, Nick Cassidy, it's been a challenging start to his season. He had a lot of misfortune, if you remember back to Sao Paulo when his race ended in spectacular style. But ever since that second race of Jeddah, he's been chomping at the bit to get back out onto the circuit. And he's come out with a fantastic start to the weekend here, after finishing at the top of the order. So that does then bring an end to free practice 1. Let's go down, catch up with Nikki, James and the crew on the ground here in Miami.
Yeah, we've got a new member of the crew with us again. Oliver Askew, welcome back. How are you?
I feel a bit of deja vu sitting here with you with the mic, so it's good to be back.
Back in the Formula E family, but back with Andretti. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, of course. It's an amazing opportunity for me to be back and contributing to the Formula E team here. I forgot how much I love Formula E after being back in the sim for a few days. I've already done over 3,000 kilometers in the sim, so they've put me to work, and I'm here if anybody has an issue.
Wow, 3,000 kilometers. That is
I know what a
quite
kilometer
committed.
Yes.
So tell us then, what did you learn over doing those 3,000 kilometers? And was it what you expected to see in FP1?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, most of those laps were done around here, obviously from this area, so I have had a lot of experience around this track, and trying to tell them as much as I can from my experience here, and it's extremely abrasive. The tires come in pretty much right away, and I think that's going to be the theme through the weekend.
I have one question for you. Gen 3 to Gen 3 Evo, what are the big differences that you found going on to the sim and prepping for this race?
You mean Gen 2 compared to Gen 3? Or?
Gen 3 Evo, the four-wheel drive, you notice a lot of difference?
Yes.
So things like this for the quali and stuff like that?
Yeah, so in attack, it's the steering torque through the wheel and understanding that front-wheel drive is definitely a different sensation and something I've never experienced before in any car. So yeah, it's a challenge for sure, yeah.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. And well, Oliver, we're going to hopefully speak to you over the course of the weekend. What is going to be the conversation going on with the garage now? You know, did the run plan go according to plan? And what have you learned from this that you can put into FP2 tomorrow?
I think it's going to be all about understanding how to prepare the tire for qualifying tomorrow. As you guys can see here, there's so many left-handers, so you know, a lot of energy going through the right side of the car. You know, whether it's 1 prep lap, 2 prep laps, 3 prep laps, and how to get that proper heat into the tire is going to be key, I think, into qualifying. But then come the race, this is a completely different story because I think we're expecting like a Peloton-style race, something like Brazil or Portland. It's going to be very exciting.
And it's rear tire limiting for a whole lap in qualifying. We see the guys really sliding around with the car a lot. Seems to be that way.
Yeah, the rear of the car, I'd say the right rear. Once you get to turn 12 and turn 13, it's really hanging on. Yeah.
Excellent. Ollie, it is so good to have you back. We will let you get back to work, but look forward to proper catch-up over the weekend.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Yeah. James, always good to hear from Ollie Askew there. But let's talk about what actually happened during FP1, because, well, there was quite an interesting moment between the Porsche drivers there. What happened between Pascal Wehrlein and Antonio Felix da Costa?
Well, we're used to seeing lots of interesting moments between the Porsche
Well,
drivers,
we
but
are,
yeah, this
yes.
one they were on a slow-down lap. You can see Antonio just didn't see Pascal whatsoever. Pascal dived to the inside, I think, to try and get track position on Antonio before they were launching their next laps. And I think it's just a miscommunication between the two of them, but definitely Antonio had no idea that Pascal was going to do that. So I think it's just a little moment. Hopefully Pascal will be okay with it.
Great. So close the door on him, but understandably so. You would have done the same.
Acceptable mistake, I would say, in a practice session.
Good, good. I mean, I suppose, is that down to the team? Should have been letting them know what was going on, or?
I think Pascal was the one behind. He's the one in control of the situation. Antonio's in front. They're both on slow laps. You know, if the one behind decides to dive down the inside, he's the one taking the risk.
Yeah. Now, Ollie just referenced it there, you know, the Peloton-style racing or slipstreaming. And there was a little bit of practice of slipstreaming during that session. It was the DS Penske cars, I think, that went out first.
Yeah,
I guess to try and work out what the gain is.
But they have to see what it's like. So basically, if you're within 3/10 of the car in front, you get a big advantage in terms of the slipstream effect, saving energy, and you can still regenerate a lot. You actually arrive at the in terms of
Okay, so unfortunately we have seemed to have lost the broadcast, so I think it is time to wrap up this one. You can join us a little bit later on, around 11 PM, for the IndyCar free practice 1 session around the streets of Long Beach, and then if there is any rain delay, which there will probably be for Bristol, but the Truck Series race is scheduled for midnight tomorrow morning British summertime. Broadcast start with green flag at 10 to 1 AM British summertime, but that is a very, very high chance of it being rain delayed and postponed to Sunday. Looking ahead to Formula E, you can catch us for free practice 2 tomorrow at 12:25 for 12:30 PM BST, 7:30 local Eastern time. Session start, half an hour session there. Then qualifying 2:30 with a session start at 2:40, and then the race broadcast starts at 6:30 PM British summertime, 1:30 Eastern. Lights out at around 7:03 PM British summertime, 2:03 local Eastern. Make sure to join us then, and make sure to join us for the rest of the sessions across this weekend. Next up on JBM, it is the IndyCar free practice 1 at Long Beach. Thanks for watching. we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.